Today we're going to do trig ratios. You should be going to desmos.com/calculator because that's what is used on the SBAC. And we will need to calculate a little bit today. And since the Wi-Fi is going so slow, I want you to at least try logging on now before we get to a question that has it, okay? I'm going to move on to our first little bit.
Why?
Okay, I'm going to move on to our first set of notes.
Wait, who math you did?
Okay, so last year you learned about sine, cosine, tangent, yes? What did you learn that helped you remember it? SOHCAHTOA, do we remember that? Bless you. Do you remember SOHCAHTOA? And remember, this is how I like to write it, so that I know what each thing means. So, first I have sine is opposite over hypotenuse, cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, and finally, tangent is opposite over adjacent. Do you remember learning that last year?
Oh, that's
Okay. So sine is opposite over hypotenuse. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. And finally, tangent is opposite over adjacent. So opposite over adjacent. Is that something we remember? Vaguely, maybe. And to remind you, that is with respect to whatever angle is given. So since my angle is down here in this bottom left corner, that means opposite is going to be the one that I open up to, like that. My adjacent is going to be the one that I share a side with. So this is adjacent because I share this side with it and the angle. And then finally, hypotenuse is always our longest side length, or it's opposite from the 90-degree angle. Do you remember learning all of that? Okay, I'll give you a couple seconds to finish copying that down. So from last year, we did SOHCAHTOA, sine, cosine, tangent. So I have sine W, cosine W, tangent W, and I have sine X, cosine X, tangent X. What is different about these two columns? One's W and one is X. And that's really important because it does change my answer. So I'm going to start with sine, cosine, and tangent of W. So I'm basing it up in this top angle. Does that make sense? Okay, so it says give each trig ratio as a fraction in simplest form. So what's a ratio? A ratio is a fraction. Yeah, we're comparing two numbers to each other. So on the SBAC, there are questions that say write the trig ratio for sine A, and you literally write whatever opposite over adjacent, opposite over hypotenuse, and that would be your answer. Okay, so when it asks for the trig ratio, you don't have to simplify it. You literally need to write opposite over hypotenuse or adjacent over hypotenuse or whatever it is. So for sine W, what do I write? Sine W is what over what? Opposite over hypotenuse. So what is opposite from W? What does W open up to be? What number, what side does it open up to?
8.
It opens up to 8. And what is my hypotenuse? 10. Are we all on the same page now? This is all I'm asking you to do. Okay, now is that my answer? No, I have to simplify that. So how do I simplify it? Divide the numerator and denominator by 2, and I get 4 over 5. Is that coming back a little bit familiar? Is that okay? If it can't be simplified, then don't simplify it. Then just leave it. Like, it needs to be simplified if it says it, but sometimes it can't be simplified. It's in the simplest form. Now I have cosine W. What is adjacent to W? 6. Good, because that is the side that shares with my angle. So I have 6 over, and what's my hypotenuse? Good. And what is that fully simplified? 3 over 5. Are we okay so far? This is pretty much review for us. Finally, I have tangent W. So tangent is what ratio? Opposite over adjacent. Do we remember that? We're just slow this morning because you went to bed too late last night? What is opposite from W? 8. Good. And what is adjacent to W?
6.
Perfect. And that simplifies to 4/3. Now I'll take a pause. Now I'm going to look at, my x measure. So I have sine x. So x is now down here. So what is sine ratio again? Opposite over hypotenuse. So what is opposite from x? Good. And my hypotenuse is still, and that simplifies to 3/5. Are we really okay? Okay. What about cosine x? What is adjacent to x? 8 over what? 10, and that is 4/5. Good. And then finally, I have tangent of x, which is what? 6/8, and that simplifies to 3/4. Where we will probably need our Desmos calculator, okay? So it says solve for x, and I have a degree and 2 sides. I have an angle and 2 sides. So my angle is 48 degrees. Do you agree with that? Okay, how are my 2 sides related to that degree? Are they opposite, adjacent, hypotenuse? So we have opposite and what else? Adjacent, right? Because my hypotenuse doesn't have a side length or a side measure for it. So if I have opposite and hypotenuse, which ratio am I going to use? I have O and A. I'm going to use tangent. So tangent of my angle equals opposite over adjacent. And I have to solve for x. So what do I do next? You can't plug this into a calculator. Do I like having that fraction? No, I can get rid of the denominator though. How am I going to do that? Can I multiply by 17 like that? What I do to one side, I'm going to do to the other. So that means I'm left with x equals 17 times tangent of 48. And those are all numbers. So this can be plugged into a calculator, okay? So on your Desmos calculator, which you should have pulled up, okay, there's a little wrench icon in the top right corner. Do you see the little wrench icon in the top right corner? On your Desmos calculator, I want you to click the wrench icon and make sure that the units are in degrees. They're in radians right now. Change the units to degrees, please. Okay, once you have done that, you can plug this into the calculator or type it, and it should give you an answer, okay? Okay, I should have x equals what? Is it 18 point? And I'm going to round it to 2 decimal places. So 88, is that what we got? If you got 20 point something, that means you did not change the mode like I told you to. So go to the wrench, change it to degrees instead of radians. Okay, next, I have number 2. I have another angle is 67 degrees. How are those sides related to that angle measure? Do I have opposite, adjacent, or hypotenuse? Which 2? I have opposite, and then my hypotenuse, remember, that's across from my 90-degree angle. So if I have opposite and hypotenuse, which ratio do I use? It's going to be sine, because that's so opposite over hypotenuse. So sine 67 equals opposite over hypotenuse. How did I solve the first one? Right. And if you notice on both of these, my variable is in the numerator, right? And to get rid of the denominator, I'm going to multiply by it on both sides. So I have x equals 29 sine 67. Can you solve that one for me now on your calculators? What is x on this one? Do we get 26.69? Is that what our answer is? Yes? Do we all know how to plug this into our Desmos calculator now? Okay, I got 2 more examples for you, and then we're going to do a little Desmos activity until the end of the period. Okay, so I have 2 more before our Desmos activity. My angle on number 3 is 29 degrees. How are those 2 sides related to it? We have opposite and hypotenuse again. So which trig ratio? We have sine. Sine 29 equals opposite over hypotenuse. But Miss Audette, x is in the denominator this time. We can't flip it quite yet, or we can, but we're going to try to stay away from that. What did I do on the last 2 problems?
You multiplied it to the other side.
Yeah, I multiplied by the denominator, and I can do that here too. But now I have x times sine 29 equals 12, right? Have I solved for x yet? No, how do I solve for x? Not quite. I have multiplication, so I can divide to undo that. Okay, isn't sine 29, isn't that just a number? If I plugged it into my calculator, it gives me a number. I'm going to divide by sine 29. Yes, I have 12 over sine 29. Did you change the mode? Did you change the mode? Are you sure? Okay. Okay, can you find this one for me? Same way. And the division sign is the slash that shares with the question mark on the keyboard. Okay, so x equals 12 over sine 29. X equals what then?
24.75.
We got 24.75? Okay, so far on all 3 of these questions, x has been a side, right? Have I had any missing angles yet? Okay, the next one I'm going to tell you. I don't have a missing angle again, but tomorrow we will have missing angles. So do you remember when you used like the inverse symbol last year with a little -1? That's what we're going to do tomorrow. Okay, finally on number 4. Excuse me, my angle is 16 degrees. How are x and 37 related to that? Which trig ratio? Adjacent and hypotenuse, which is cosine. So I have cosine of 16 equals x over 37. So this one's not too bad again. I'm going to multiply both sides. And then I have, x equals 37 cosine of 16. And that can be solved on your calculator. So again, on this one, x was a missing side. Tomorrow we'll have x as a missing angle and do our inverse, okay? Okay, so check this. Plug that into Desmos. And remember, round the side to 2 decimal places. So we should have 35.57 because the 6 rounds up. Okay, because we're done with this for today. Now you're going to do a Desmos activity for the rest of the period.